Whenever you're ready.
Alright, so I'm Tiyona THT, and I did the Handmaid's Tale. Well, y'all did the Handmaid's Tale. Okay, so to start off, does anybody know what compulsory means? So I'm going to be using this word in my thesis. So the definition of compulsory is required by law or rule, mandatory. So to start off, there were a lot of things required for the Society of Gilead to work. So they had a lot of unnecessary compulsory rules that kind of is different from today. So my thesis is Abel uses compulsory symbols to reveal how desirable things and forms of expression of life before Gilead became controlled absolutely by the Republic, and how they displayed the punishments of rebellion to instill fear in its people. This connects back to the lack of freedom and individuality, as the government dictated people to feel, think, and act a certain way to prevent revolution. Alright, so the compulsory symbols I will be talking about is the ceremony, hanging of the bodies on the wall, also from the men salvaging, the women salvaging, and the persecution. Alright, to start off the ceremony, the quote I particularly used was, "Above me, towards the head of the bed, Serena Joy is arranged. Outspread, her legs are apart, I lie between them, my head is on her stomach, her pubic bone under the base of my skull, her thighs on either side of me." So in this particular quote, I seen imagery. It was more of a formal tone because the ceremony wasn't necessarily about emotions, it was more about a job, and which is heavily contrasted to society before, when sex was about love, connection, passion, and now it's more of a job where people were dreading to do it instead of being like desirable. And I also thought it was kind of ironic because Serena Joy was in the ceremony when she had no parts of it. She was just there for support, which is like heavily contrasted to sex before the Republic of Gilead. And yeah. So the next symbol I decided to do was the hanging of the bodies on the wall. This was also mandatory by the Republic to instill fear into the people by showing them, like, if you act out of place or if you don't follow the rules, then this is probably what's going to happen to you next. So the quote I used was, "Beside the main gateway, there are 6 more bodies hanging. By the necks, their hands are tied in front of them, their heads in white bags, tipped sideways onto their shoulders." So I kind of used like the hands are tied in front of them to like show like the actions that they were doing wasn't what the society wanted to be. And I kind of thought that by the Republic hanging certain people, they kind of decided to the people what they morally should think is right, what morally they should think is wrong. So without giving the people their own sense of judgment. For example, the bodies hanging were of doctors done like abortions in their previous life. So they were being judged on something previously, but because the society is all about reproduction, then they were killed, and they kind of make the people in the society have like some sort of resentment towards people like that, even if they don't feel that way, because the society thinks that everything's about reproduction. The next symbol I will be doing is the women salvaging, and to start off, the salvaging stems from the word salvation, which is seen in the Bible, and salvation is to be like free or to free yourself from sin. And I thought was ironic because they had the women killing people, which is a sin in the Bible, and the killing people was, I guess, to free the society from sin, but they're also making they're using the women as objects in order to like do, I want to say, their bidding, or to kill people that they thought were against the Republic. So the quote I used was, "I've leaned forward to touch the rope in front of me. In the time with the others in front of me, both hands on it, the hairy rope, sticky with the tar in the hot sun. Then placed my hand on my heart to show unity with the other salvagers and my consent and my complicity in the death of this woman." So I thought this underlying part was ironic because you can't show consent and complicity if you have no choice. If it's forced upon you, then you can't consent to it. And to show that they full-heartedly agree with it is not true, because if they didn't agree with it, then they would probably suffer a similar fate. Does anybody know what complicity means? Well, complicity is like involvement in wrongdoing or a crime. So basically, the woman had to consent that they were okay with killing a woman or okay with being an accomplice to this woman's death, when it itself is a sin and probably wasn't, it's not moral. So even if they didn't think it was moral, then they still had to do it. It kind of took away from the judgment of individuality, so they couldn't judge for themselves. The last symbol I did was the partition, and I used the specific quote: "Now there are sounds, gasps, a loud noise like growling, yells, and the red bodies tumble forward, and I can no longer see that he's obscured by arms, fists, and feet." So I broke this down. So sounds and gasps I thought were like from women who didn't want to participate in the partition and were kind of shocked, while like a loud noise like growling and yells were from women who were kind of brainwashed by the society to think, oh, this is wrong, and that because it had anything to do with the reproduction that he should die or be punished severely. And like the sounds and gasps, like I thought were from, like I said, women who didn't have a choice, didn't want to do it, but they still had to do it because they were being watched. And they were being watched, so if they didn't particularly take part into it, then they would probably suffer a similar fate taken away. So they had no choice in the say. Also, the yells and screams, basically by telling the women a lie that it was from a man who raped a handmaid. That basically they're kind of using like propaganda, I want to say almost, in order to kind of sway the women to think one way and to think more similar to what they want, in order to kind of get rid of their threats, like because he was a leader in the revolution. And in my conclusion, the government mandated events like the ceremony, the partition, the salvaging, and the hanging of the bodies on the walls were held to create to brainwash women into Gilead's beliefs, like forbidding forms of entertainment or religion, and scaring them into obeying the law while taking away their beliefs held in previous life.
What for? Okay. So does anybody have any questions for Tiyona? I have always. Yeah, you thought you were getting so you talked about the salvaging, the partition, and the ceremony. Of those different sort of like compulsory aspects of the Republic of Gilead, which one do you think was most effective in controlling the behavior of the handmaids?
I think the salvaging was the most effective because they're having like a part into killing someone, and they know that they're being watched, unlike like the ceremony. So if they're being watched, they're forced to do it. It kind of takes a toll on like their mental stability and their mental health. So basically, it kind of rids them of like their humanity, and they're doing something they probably wouldn't do in the previous life. Also, in the ceremony, it's not like you're being, I would say it's a form of punishment also, because it's not something most handmaids wanted to do, but in the salvaging, you're seeing people punished, you're punishing them, and yeah.
All right, one more hand. Thanks, Tiyona. All right, so there we go. Okay, so really quickly, I'm going to give you guys the rest of the time we're together as work time. Let me say just a couple more things. One, let me stop this.